Yep.
And we're back. This is Cut the Noise Show, where we have authentic conversations with corporate athletes and business owners, highlighting their success, their journey to success. I'm your guide, Kabi Asari, and today I am very excited to be having a conversation with Diane Waye and highlighting her work. The reason I have Diane on here, and I'll give a brief little intro. She doesn't know I'm doing this, so I might embarrass her a little bit, but we have to highlight it. And is a gifted healer, trainer, and educator. She is a master teacher of AIS, which she will get into and explain, for professional education for over 23 years of experience in the field. She provides credits for MADIS, American Council on Exercise, and the National Certification Board for Therapeutic Massage and Body Work, and for California chiropractors, among others. Diane helps people get out of pain, which you will definitely dive into today, enhance performance, and function well by restoring a range of motion. So she loves restoring freedom of movement, which I have experienced myself, and solving problems with AIS, and then teaching others to do the same too. And that's a little intro I have about you, but why don't you tell us, who are you and what is AIS?
Yeah. First, let me say what an honor it is to be on your show today, and what a pleasure it's been to get to know you a little bit. And what was the question?
Yeah, tell us, who are you? Who's Diane Waye and what is
So
AIS?
I have uh, my mom had a pretty severe scoliosis, so I was very aware that pain could be in my future, and I understood that learning flexibility could be important to that. So I started doing yoga when I was a teen, and it certainly wasn't popular in this country then, and have continued to dive into what helps bodies function well. And in 1997, I was so blessed to be introduced to Aaron Mattis, and I took a seminar that he taught in Southern California, and it completely blew my mind because it, the science that he uses was completely different than everything that I'd learned in yoga or fitness at that time, or really anything else. But it was so effective, and it caught my attention. So I basically decided I needed to start over with my training and flexibility, and go with what I could see was brilliant. So I've been on the path of sharing active isolated stretching with people ever since. Yeah.
That that is fantastic. Diane, let me backtrack a little bit. You said a lot there, and I want to unpack some sections of it, if that's okay. So you
For
said your
sure.
mom had scoliosis. Is that right?
Hmm.
Okay, and that
I
set
mean,
you
I
on
do
some.
too,
Yeah,
but you can't really see it that much. I get compliments on my posture, and it's because I worked on it.
yeah. I mean, honestly, when I met you, that was one of the things I noticed right away. I was like, I did not realize that anybody could have posture that good. I straightened up right away when I saw you. My it was a mirror. I realized how horrible my posture is by watching you walk around. So that makes a lot of sense to me. But you said it encouraged you to seek out yoga. Like, what was it? Was she in pain? Was it what was it about it that encouraged you to seek out yoga?
Well, yoga was the only type of flexibility that I encountered then,
Okay.
and she was in pain a lot, and and I didn't want to be in that much pain.
Okay.
And I look a lot like she did, and have a lot of the structural configurations that she did. So I was, what can I do to be proactive so that I can, so that my time in this vehicle, in my body in this lifetime, can be much more pleasant. So I chose to uh, keep my eyes and ears open for what would lead me on a path of wellness.
Mm. And then you said you were blessed to find Aaron Mattis. What about what he was teaching? You said the science that he was teaching was nothing like you've ever seen before. Can you unpack that a little bit? What was the science and why
Yes.
was
Well, kudos to my friend Robert Rudlick, who introduced me to the work the year before and invited me to that seminar. But I went in with the yoga indoctrination mindset of long held stretches, which is also what the
it?
fitness industry was doing at that time, um, and still sort of is. Eh. But now only after the workout, only after the event. Yeah, okay, later. So I went in with the indoctrination that holding a stretch for a long period of time was how to relax into it and gain range of motion. And his work is very different. It uses Nobel award-winning science and the and honors how the neurology of our human bodies actually work. And so it is very different from what a lot of us grew up with or have been even lately exposed to, thinking of proper flexibility training. It's more like if you work out in a gym and you do reps and sets, it's more like that than it is because it's at the end of your workout, you don't go and switch out your nervous system for one that loves static stretching because it doesn't really exist. So it was flying in the face of what I had been indoctrinated with and told was the right way to do it for years. But I could see that it worked. And I could see the profound changes, even that he was making on this. So like him, I demo every stretch that I teach on students, and you could just see like people's bodies change all weekend. And of course, he makes sure everyone gets on the table. And he picked me for feet because I didn't volunteer for anything. I was being a little shy. And it was incredibly profound. And I went home and my feet felt great, but none of my shoes fit because my feet were now the size they were meant to
Mm.
be. So just because it wasn't the dogma of static stretching, it was
Yeah.
the science of what works in our human mammalian bodies with our nervous systems that we actually have. So yeah,
Now
science.
that's okay. So we have to pause a little bit and go really slow because that's even for me, I've been in the industry, health industry for a while. And when I first met you, and for everybody listening, just so you know, I finished up as a massage therapist, and my teacher recommended that I go to Diane to experience her work because she had worked with Diane before in the past and had amazing things to say about you. And so, I was curious. So I connected with you, and I came in, and you got me on the table. And honestly, I got up from the table feeling taller, feeling more like I had never felt before in terms of stretching. So when you're talking about the dogma or whether it's associated with yoga, and I'm definitely not a yogi, but I've certainly been taught a particular way of stretching. Right. And when you're talking about that, I can definitely relate in the sense of like, I was told, hey, you hold it in this position, you hold it for a long time, and that's how you stretch. So, can you dive in a little bit more when you say that's not necessarily the way that it should? Are you saying that way is wrong? Are you saying it's incorrect? Can you unpack that a little bit? And what was so different about the way that he was proposing in that way you teach?
Sure. First, let me say it was really fun working on you because uh, like people who actually think you were getting it. You were getting it in your body. You were getting it in your mind. You were like, oh, this makes sense to my body. This makes sense to my mind. Like, how come nobody ever told me this before? That kind of thing. So, and then your original question, I need to stop inserting my own.
like what's so
Uh,
you made the
so I'm
distinction.
going to give you the dogma of static stretching, and
Right,
so
right.
is it wrong? First of all, let me just say that these are not super high paid professions to whom
Mm,
I teach, to whom Erin teaches. It's not like any of these coaches or trainers or massage therapists or not anybody goes and says, "Oh, let me do this lame stuff because I don't care." Like they do care, but they
mm.
might not have been exposed to the best information because it's not in the physical therapy textbook. So I get a lot of people from there too. So the is it wrong? It's not as good as it could be. Static stretching is not as good as active isolated stretching. Because it's trying to get you range of motion at whatever cost. So at the cost of overriding your nervous system, which
And
I'm
it's a
not.
static stretching you're talking about.
Yeah,
Okay.
because after 2 seconds, the stretch reflex kicks in and says, "Help, get me out of here."
Mm.
But your coach or trainer is like leaning on your leg, or your yoga teacher saying, "Oh no, it's divine," vision pose is divine, and so and your hips or your knees are screaming no. So if you think that range of motion is the only thing that you want, sure, go for it. I try to not overdo it, but if you want to work with your nervous system and achieve excellent flexibility results painlessly, effectively, then use actual science. So Sherrington won the Nobel Prize in Medicine approximately 100 years ago for the law that now bears his name, Sherrington's Law of Reciprocal Innervation and Inhibition.
Please,
And
sorry, say that again.
Sherrington's Law of Innervation and Inhibition.
Mm-hmm.
So Sherrington's Law. So, and I would say that people who lift weights have somewhat discovered this, honestly, before people who specialize in flexibility did. Because if you're doing an exercise, say that strengthens your biceps, you will be lengthening the muscles on the other side. And so while you're focusing on one muscle, the opposite muscle, the muscle that performs the opposite action, is inhibited from firing.
Mm.
So that's one of the principles. So there's an active engagement of the muscle opposite of what you're stretching. So that's so Sherrington's Law is one of the first principles. But also respecting the stretch reflex. That's something that doesn't happen in PNF or static stretching. They're just assuming that overriding it is the best you can do, and it's not. It's not. You don't do that when you're lifting weights, I hope. You don't do that, other times. You pay attention to it. Your stretch reflex is, when you go to your doctor and you're sitting on the table and she takes the rubber mallet and she whacks your knee and you kick her and she's hoping you do it because it proves that your stretch reflex is working. So that is one aspect of the stretch reflex. It responds to sudden pressure. It also responds to being held too long.
Mm.
And too much force. So when the rubber mallet it's rubber, so it's probably not that too much, but it is sudden. So any of those three things will set it off. And say if you're petting a pet turtle, right? And it sticks its little head out and it likes you petting it for a second, and then it tries to pull its head back in. If you grab its head, it's not going to be pretty.
Mm.
Right. And so that's, so the I need a better analogy for that, obviously, but the holding a stretch too long is like holding the turtle's head. You might get the turtle's head to stay there. The turtle's neck might get longer while it does that, but it's really not in the turtle's best interest. So, but it's and another thing that static stretching doesn't take into consideration is if you simply, well, I got a little light on my hand here. If you simply take your hand and you pull, and yeah, can you show it? You're going to show it better. No, pull it back. No, turn your palm, like that, and grab your thumb, and don't actually hurt yourself, but pull it back so that it starts to blanch, right? And so that is the blood. Well, it's not showing that well, but you can kind of see it on mine. It's the blood gets squeezed out.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So there's no fluid exchange. There's no fresh blood in, out with the bad, in with the good. There's no fluid exchange. There's no blood and oxygen exchange in a static stretch.
Got it.
Right? But if you do the aromatic style of 1.5 to 2 seconds, and you do repetitions, you're bringing fresh blood and oxygen to those tissues every single repetition. And so if you're increasing your range of motion by a degree, which is modest actually for what we often do, if you're increasing the range of motion by a degree in 10 repetitions, that's 10 degrees of range of motion. In 2 sets, that's 20 degrees of range of motion. In 3 sets, do the math. But there is an optimal range of motion at which one should stop. And that's important information for people who are hypermobile, such as myself, and a lot of other people with SCOLI, and a lot of other people who get injured. Hypermobility, instability in the joints, you don't want to violate that either. So it's important to know where the joint should stop. But most people, their range of motion is stopping way before their optimal range of motion. So if you get fresh blood and oxygen, you're working with your neurology, you're working with your circulatory system, you're working with your brain, and you feel good while you're doing it. That's actually kind of huge too, feeling good while you're doing it. You're going to get better results. And Aaron Mattis has created his life's work is over 300 stretches that are super specific for every muscle, every joint crossing in the body, because muscles move joints, and some muscles cross more than one joint, and some muscles have more than one action. And so understanding the actual action of each muscle and how it contributes to the moving parts of a whole is essential. And that's what you get if you work with a Mattis certified active isolated stretching practitioner. So I'm that, and I'm also one of his teachers. But even just to get to the Mattis certification levels, you've had to learn a lot. You've had to put in a lot of hours. So there's a list on his site of certified practitioners. If you're in San Francisco,
Yes. And I thank you for breaking down the science, because I think this is very understood. And I've met so many people, both lay people who are not in the health industry, who will say things like, I'm not flexible, I should do yoga, or even highly educated. And I would love to get your opinion on this, because I think you have one, right? Or moving experts or movers and therapists, etc., who will, throughout all my athletic career, I was encouraged to stay in uncomfortable positions for long periods of time. And what I basically heard you say is that is not what you want to do. So to tell us, what's your advice to somebody who's saying, I'm not flexible, should I go do yoga? I should really go do yoga. Or the high school coach, or the college coach, or the pro coach who's having their athletes hold positions, uncomfortable positions, for extended period of time. What is your opinion on that, and two, your advice for those individuals?
Yeah, not a fan. My advice is for all those coaches and trainers, athletic trainers, college coaches, professional coaches, high school coaches, little league coaches. Come take my seminar. You can write it off on your taxes. It's a professional education. Likely you'll get continuing education credit for it too. So learn the science of flexibility. And I know there's some really big names out there who would do well to learn this also. But I guess
are we going to name some names? Are we going
to
name some names?
No, we're not going to name some names. No, I'm not trying to start wars here. But I do, like I said, people don't give out erroneous information on purpose because they're
Hmm.
making bank on erroneous information. I realize
Sure.
it might be awkward for some careers to all of a sudden get this epiphany, after they've got multiple books out and stuff. And But do it anyhow. You can always just say, "Hey, look what I learned,"
Yeah.
and reach a bunch of people, and do a lot of people a lot of good. But under just realizing that just because somebody regurgitated it to you doesn't mean it's right. You know,
Mm.
I mean uh, that's how racism perpetuates. That's how classism perpetuates. That's how all the we're not too many rabbit holes there, but that's how a lot of stuff perpetuates. That the world would be better off if we open our minds and made actual inquiries into what is real. And science usually, you go into it with an idea, and your idea may influence it to some degree, but then that's where other professionals jump in,
Right.
and say, let's test it this way, let's test it that way.
Yeah.
By the time you won a Nobel Prize for it, it's been tested, it's been checked.
Right. And I appreciate you diving into that because that's kind of what we do on this show here is really looking at systems, especially in obviously health, right? Of not regurgitating information just because that's what we've been told over and over and over again, but re-examining our prisms and our institutions of thought. So, and that's why I wanted you to come on here to really dive into this because I have not met anybody ever in my entire career who's ever really broken down stretching and the science of stretching the way that you do. And I wanted to maybe backtrack a little bit and just maybe summarize or highlight like the point that you were making a little earlier is like, what is the cost of ignoring your body's response? Like you stated, like you can ignore your body's response if you want flexibility at all costs. What are some of those costs so we can really highlight that for people? Like what are they risking? Some people may say, whatever. I'll do it at all costs. What are you risking when you're doing
Well, to that person, I would say try some active isolated stretching because it feels good and it's going to get you better results. So there you
yeah.
go. And if someone with an open mind actually tries it, they're probably not going to be like, "Oh no, I much prefer pigeon pose and all that thing to doing it in a way that feels good."
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
know. Maybe there's anyhow. So what is the cost? So I once saw an article before I knew how to save them, sadly. And the title of the article was, "Does stretching make you run slower?"
Mm.
And their conclusion was, yes, it does. And the reason their conclusion was, yes, it does, was because they studied like 4 or 5 different types of stretching, but they did not study active isolated stretching. So a
Mm.
lot of the world's top runners, and certainly every runner I've ever worked with, have PR'd, improve their time, personal best, using active isolated stretching. But since they didn't use it in this study, and they had people do static stretching and PNF and a few others um, uh, before their run, so if you override your nervous system and then you ask it to do something, what do you think it's going to say?
Mm.
I had birds in mind, but anyhow, it'd be like, you didn't listen to me, so now am I really supposed to listen to you? So that's one of the costs. Another cost is that once you're used to overriding your nervous system, that you so it's ischemic. Okay, put that in the same sentence with a cardiovascular event, and it's not pretty either. But these are just your body muscles, right? So it's less dramatic than if your heart goes ischemic or your brain, but still, it's not a good thing, right? So you want blood and lymph to flow, and also you could sort of torture yourself into to an inappropriate range of motion without having the strength to get in and out. And then also people who get used to having pain in their stretches can easily overstretch and not realize it until later. They get, I the injuries that people ask me to not talk about using their names, tend to be like yoga teachers or something like that, like who overstretch because
Mm.
we're coming to
What
them
what are
for
some examples of those those injuries of like yoga teachers, for example, have?
The front of the shoulder. So
Oh,
chaturanga, which is the yoga push-up, and on the West Coast, it gets used a lot, even more than
yeah.
we. So if you dip the head of the shoulder, the arm bone at the shoulder joint down, you kind of annoy the biceps tendon where it crosses the shoulder and create a lot of inflammation and make it so that you can't do that move or anything else for a while,
Mm.
or anything, weight bearing with your arms. That's a real common one. And then from students, a lot of times it'll be a hamstring injury because they're putting their entire posterior chain on stretch while overriding their nervous system, thinking that they're stretching their hamstrings, but they've also compromised their low back. And
Mm.
so that is what goes out the the most often. Um, uh, Asking too many things to do, asking too many parts to stretch all at the same time while using a system that doesn't honor your nervous system. That's a huge cost, but also wasted time. Like I've had people come to me and be like, "I've been doing yoga for 20 years, and I got more flexibility on your table in 2 hours than I did in all those 20 years." I'm like, "Yeah, okay. So what you gonna do
And
now?"
I can personally attest to that. To to
Yeah.
exactly what you just said. And just in 90 minutes, getting more flexibility and flexibility that feels good, like you keep saying, than
Mhm.
I've ever gotten in my entire life. But I had a few like kind of quick rapid fire questions that I know some of my clients and some of my viewers are gonna want to know the answers to that I wanted to just shoot out for you
Mhm.
to answer. And they're kind of like myth buster type of questions, right? So for example, let me give the first one and you just give me a fire response to it and maybe break it down a little bit. But the first one I hear a lot, especially with athletes that lift heavy, is do not stretch before you lift. Is that true or false, and why?
Both. It is true that they should not be doing static stretching or PNF or anything else like that because it overrides the nervous system and they need their nervous system on board. False
Mm.
in relation to active isolated stretching because it invigorates the body. It works with the nervous system. It wakes it up. And so if you have an awakened nervous system, and awakened in a good way, if you have an awakened nervous system, and your muscles are already full of fresh blood and oxygen, when you go to lift weights, that's only going to be a good thing, right? Yeah. So if you're using active isolated stretching, yes, do it before your activity, please.
Perfect. Okay. And another one I hear,
Encouraged. Like I've never seen it go wrong. I've never ever
yes,
ever seen it go wrong.
yeah, I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by that, and I appreciate you answering that. So another one I had and that I get often is, what should I do? Or an issue I see quite often is low back pain, right? What should I do for that in terms of stretching? Like, should I be stretching? Should I not stretch? What should I do in terms of low back pain?
Oh, that's a really good one. I get a lot of people coming to me for low back pain, so much that I put it on my Instagram. Um, so in Aaron Mattis's work, the chapter for hips, it's called the hip low back protocol. There's 30 something specific stretches and you have two legs, so it's both sides. So 60 something. Um, uh, because if the muscles of the hip are tight, it's really hard to get the back to be happy. And especially
Mm.
if you think about psoas. So the psoas goes from T12, L1, L2, L3, L4, L5, cuts through your body and then attaches to your femur. Oh, it has 70 attachments, it attaches to all those discs. So so you want to make sure that the neighboring houses aren't on fire, and they often are, right? So you want to, if you just jump first right in to the low back, it's not as good. So in working with people with low back pain, I open up the hips and get their body used to a system that actually honors their system. And the glutes, next door neighbors, psoas, crosses through, iliac, like everything. Rectus femoris, one of your quadricep muscles, crosses the hip. That in a lot of athletes tends to be the tightest of all of their hip flexors. So I want to lengthen those and fill them with fresh blood and oxygen so that there's less compression in the area. I want to educate the person about how the simple movements that they do in their daily life are either helping them or hurting them. Check how they're sleeping and how they're sitting and how they're doing even stairs. How I want to open that up, and then towards the end, I will take them through some actual low back stretches. But we have to create a safe place for that to land first. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. That does make sense. And let me give you, I have so many of these, we won't be able to get to all of them. So in fact, actually, why don't you tell folks, because we won't be able to get to all of the questions, how do people get in touch with you? Let's make sure we get that in first.
I would say the best way is to go to my website, Stretching by the Bay. If you forget that, just Google Stretching San Francisco. So stretchingbythebay.com is my website, and use the new patient form or the seminar registration form to reach out to me, because a lot of stuff goes to spam otherwise. And my phone number is on the site, or just text me on my phone number. Sometimes I don't see messages on the other mediums, being my age, quite as often as somebody who's really young might see them. So
Although we'll say you are very responsive.
Text or email, that would be the best two ways.
Okay, perfect. And you mentioned a seminar, and I was going to ask you, for somebody who maybe, obviously it's great if you're a professional in the health field, you're a therapist, a coach, a trainer. Who are some of the other professionals that you teach?
Well, one time I was teaching at Esalen, and one of the other teachers sadly couldn't make it due to back pain. He turned around in the airport.
Oh, wow.
And so all the people who would come to take his course, which was a music course, all of a sudden had no seminar to take for the week. And a couple of them happened to be having dinner with me on Friday night, and so one of them was trained as an EMT. So he's a professional musician, but he also had some other So as long as somebody has the background to not be saying, "What's a quadricep muscle?" So as long as someone has the background or can be a positive participant, you don't have to be seeking continuing education credits to take my course. Did I miss part of your question?
No, that's perfect. And I was wondering, can like a lay person take the course just to learn for themselves,
I would need
or
to
the
vet
seminar?
the layperson during shelter.
Okay.
Suddenly, March 2020, I heard of Zoom. And so I taught on Zoom for a while. I still have some clients on Zoom. And I kind of like Zoom because I can look in on how people are actually doing their home program, instead of 30 seconds after I show it to them. So how's it working in their environment? So, I can do that with people all over the world. I am very focused on the professional education course this fall of 2022, but I'm open to creating more courses for lay people, specifically. And we did February of 2020, we did hips and hearts. So it was partner stretching. So fun, because it's like now you're going to have a stretch coach that a stretch therapist that you're probably living with or married to, and you both learn this, and it's a fun way to connect. So we did that a couple times during shelter too,
I love that.
except on Zoom.
Yeah.
But I'm open to all kinds of things. I recently did a on-site for a large corporation, and that was super fun. and those people were not in this field at all. So
Okay.
it's a matter of like reach out to me. Let me know what you want. I mean, like I got hired by the company rather than the individuals. Um, but these skills translate really well. One of my colleagues brings them into a company in England that he works with on a regular
Wow.
basis. Help the
Yeah.
employees like stay. They're not doing a super deep dive, but like they
Sure.
are not having injuries, which is
Yeah.
actually a very good cost benefit consideration for any company.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
was gonna say, I mean, a lot of my clients are what I call corporate athletes, right? That's what they do for a living, and I think they would be interested in this for themselves. So you're saying, they could reach out as a company, the company could reach out to you, or the individuals could reach out to you. So I think that's, if you're listening to this or you hear this, you should definitely do that, because I think that would make a lot of sense, especially with the low back, with all the carpal tunnel, and a lot of those sort of things that I see with clients. So when is the next seminar?
So, so the professional education seminar is October of 2022, from Friday, October 21st through Sunday, the 23rd, at the San Francisco School of Massage. Um, And about your previous question, so I currently have 2 openings in my schedule for corporate clients, but any individuals, uh, I'm happy to speak with anyone about seeing if I can help them with get their needs satisfied. And I also know therapists all over the world, so active isolated stretching therapists. Uh, but yeah, I'm super excited about the seminar because that creates a ripple effect. You know how when like feed a man a fish, you feed him for a day, teach a man to fish, right? And so when I teach these seminars, the ripple effect that I have on people that I will never personally meet is super heartwarming to me, and I get thank yous from people who've taken the course about how much it has up leveled their their profession, their professionalism, what they're able to do with their clients, and how much better they're able to take care of their own bodies, and
Yes.
just how profound it is, and maybe they couldn't make it to Florida to study with Aaron or something like
Sure.
that. So um, yeah, I'm super excited about the October Active Isolated Stretching Seminar for Professional Education.
And that's October 27th,
No, October 21st
21st. Got it.
through the 23rd. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Um,
Perfect.
and in case you're seeing this some other year, dear future viewers, this is 2022. So October 21st of 2022 is when the course begins. And if you go to stretchingbythebay.com, there is a link. There's a lot more information and a registration link and you can ask me questions there. Or you can sign up.
Perfect. And I want to thank you for the work you do. I've experienced it personally. Uh, I'm sad I won't be able to make it to the October seminar, but I definitely have it on my list and to make it to the next one.
I
And
was
thank
really
you.
looking forward to that. Okay, you're
Yes.
actually throwing the wedding this weekend. Let me that weekend.
Yeah. I'll be attending a wedding, and hopefully my back won't give out on the dance floor because I might need more. No, I'm just kidding. I might need more more stretching. But I really appreciate you, Diane, for the work that you're doing. It's extremely important. This information is overlooked, understudied, and not understood. So I really think it's a missing piece of the puzzle when it comes to health. So thank you for coming onto the show and to expanding on it, and providing resources for folks that want to get in touch with you and see if they can either touch base with you as a group, corporate, for themselves as professionals, and even lay people that have touched base with you. So thank you so much for making it on the show and for expanding on this topic. I think it's incredibly important.
My pleasure. It's
And thank you guys for tuning in. This is another episode of Cut the Noise Show. And until next time, peace.